I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming our neighbor, the depth of our friendship, and then these opportunities that we both have.
On January 16th, 2026, something extraordinary happened behind the closed doors of Clarence House. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the most disciplined and steadfast child of Queen Elizabeth II, revealed information that had been whispered for years, but never confirmed. She confirmed the existence of what had become known in intelligence and royal circles as the Saudi Dossier. For decades, the House of Windsor had lived by one simple but powerful rule: never complain, never explain. This rule had protected their dignity, maintained their power, and kept the royal family above the petty drama that filled tabloids around the world. But with this revelation, that silence was broken. The Saudi Dossier, as Princess Anne confirmed, contained detailed intelligence gathered by British agencies about Meghan Markle, her lifestyle, and her rapid entry into the royal family. For Prince Harry, who had spent years defining himself as a man who broke away from tradition to protect the woman he loved, this confirmation was devastating. He reportedly went silent for hours, unable to process the reality that what he believed to be love and freedom might have been orchestrated around him in ways he never imagined. The dossier, compiled by MI6, wasn't ordinary background research. It wasn't the kind of routine check that any royal would undergo when marrying someone from the public. It was high-level intelligence vetting, looking at patterns of wealth, travel, relationships, and access that were unusual for someone with Meghan's publicly declared income. Intelligence sources had noted that between 2008 and 2012, Meghan portrayed herself as a struggling actress, living modestly and taking small roles in Hollywood. Yet, at the same time, MI6 traced her presence on luxury yachts across the Mediterranean, in Monaco, Capri, and the Turkish Riviera, attending private events with high-profile financiers, art dealers with ties to Russia, and individuals connected to Gulf intelligence networks. These trips, which were verified through satellite and travel records, suggested that her lifestyle was far beyond what her official income could have supported. According to the dossier, her expenses during this period were estimated to exceed £1.4 million, while her declared income was under £40,000 per year. Intelligence analysts use the term shadow patrons to describe the situation: people who fund access and appearances without leaving a clear trail, people who want someone to be in a specific place for strategic reasons. Princess Anne, according to palace sources, confronted Prince Harry with this information in early 2017. Harry's response was simple. He loved Meghan and refused to believe anything that could contradict the story he had built in his mind. But love, the dossier suggested, doesn't explain yachts, private events in Istanbul, or luxury accommodations in Monaco. It doesn't explain a pattern of connections that placed Meghan in powerful circles long before she met Prince Harry. The dossier included a detailed examination of her movements, her exposure to elite gatherings, and her relationships with influential figures. MI6 analysts described it as a case of strategic social placement. This term, rarely used outside intelligence circles, refers to individuals who are not spies or agents themselves, but who are positioned deliberately in high-value social environments for advantage. The dossier suggested that Meghan was being advanced, placed, and cultivated for strategic access. It was not a matter of her talent or luck. According to the intelligence reports, a man named Marcus Anderson, a figure known for managing connections between influential people, played a key role in orchestrating her social rise. He is officially the global membership director of Soho House, a private club with locations around the world. But intelligence sources linked him to efforts that positioned individuals like Meghan in powerful social circles. Records indicate that Meghan's attendance at high-profile events, such as the grand opening of Soho House Istanbul in 2015 was not coincidental. She was added to the guest list manually, at a time when these gatherings were monitored for their influence on global diplomacy, soft power, and cultural engagement. Analysts interpreted this as a final stage of vetting. The dossier also noted that gifts and accommodations she received were not consistent with her reported income, including items like luxury earrings later worn at public events. Intelligence analysts tracked these gifts to wealthy patrons, including individuals connected to Gulf royal families. These gifts were not only luxurious, but also symbolic. They signaled continued allegiance to networks of influence even after entering the royal family. In this context, the dossier presented a haunting question. Was Meghan in control of her own path? Or was someone else orchestrating the events that brought her into proximity with Prince Harry? For Harry, the confirmation of the dossier's existence by Princess Anne represented a shattering realization. The man who had sacrificed rank, privilege, and career for love suddenly faced the possibility that he had been drawn into a carefully managed social and political network. The story of their romance, which had been celebrated in global media as a fairy tale, now looked less like destiny and more like strategic planning. Hashtags related to the Saudi dossier trended across the United Kingdom. The palace went silent, and sources reported that King Charles III was deeply affected, though not surprised. Prince William reportedly walked out of the briefing without comment. Harry, far from the public eye in Montecito, California, reportedly spent hours in isolation, struggling to process the reality of what had been confirmed. This moment not only reframed the narrative of his relationship with Meghan, but also cast a new light on the role of Princess Anne. She had long been the quiet observer of the royal family, disciplined, unwavering, and committed to the institution above all else. By confirming the dossier, she revealed the weight of knowledge she had carried for years. She had warned Harry once, but he had chosen love over doubt. Now, nearly a decade later, the confirmation of intelligence reports validated her concerns and shifted the perception of her role within the royal family. For those following the royal story, this revelation raised broader questions. How could someone like Harry, raised in one of the most scrutinized families in the world, miss such signals? How could someone who served in high-stakes military operations, disciplined in strategy and risk assessment, be blind to what intelligence analysts had identified? The dossier suggested that he wasn't blind, but that his perception was intentionally influenced by the narrative he wanted to believe, that he was rescuing someone in need rather than being part of a calculated social placement. And with this confirmation, the stage was set for examining not only the financial and social elements of Meghan's past, but also the emotional and institutional impact on the monarchy. Analysts, insiders, and commentators began to assess the broader consequences. This dossier was more than a file. It was a reflection of how modern social networks, wealth, and intelligence intersected with one of the world's oldest institutions. For the public, the unfolding narrative combined elements of royal intrigue, intelligence operations, and personal drama, a mix that created fascination, shock, and debate. And for Harry, the revelation was deeply personal. The identity he had built, the choices he had made, and the sacrifices he had undertaken were now framed within a new, unsettling context. As the hours passed on January 16, 2026, the story grew beyond the palace walls. Social media discussions, news coverage, and opinion pieces began to dissect the dossier, the yachts, the gifts, and the role of Princess Anne. Questions were raised not just about Meghan, but about the structural vulnerabilities within the monarchy that allowed such a situation to develop. The dossier, confirmed as real by Princess Anne, had changed everything. The understanding of Harry's relationship, the credibility of his narrative, and the public perception of the royal family's inner workings. It was no longer a story about love, fame, or celebrity. It was a story about intelligence, strategy, and the interplay of personal and institutional decisions over nearly a decade. By the evening, the narrative was clear. Princess Anne had been right all along. She had seen, analyzed, and warned. Harry had chosen his path, and the confirmation of the dossier forced him and the public to reconsider everything they thought they knew. The story of strategic social placement, as revealed by the Saudi dossier, begins with Marcus Anderson, a figure who operated quietly behind the scenes, connecting people, events, and opportunities in ways that were largely invisible to the public eye. Officially, Anderson was the global membership director of Soho House, the private members club with locations in major cities like Toronto, Istanbul, and Los Angeles. To most, he was simply someone who organized social events. But according to intelligence sources, his role extended far beyond hospitality. He was described as a facilitator of high-value introductions, a man whose job was to place individuals into networks where money, influence, and soft power converged. In the case of Meghan Markle, the dossier suggested that Anderson orchestrated key moments in her social ascent long before she ever met Prince Harry. In 2015, Meghan attended the grand opening of Soho House, Istanbul. To most guests, this was simply a stylish launch party, an opportunity to meet artists, entrepreneurs, and celebrities. But the dossier revealed a much more calculated purpose. Security analysts monitored the event closely because it brought together influential figures from Gulf intelligence circles, sovereign wealth networks, and cultural diplomacy organizations. These were not social gatherings in the ordinary sense. They were curated environments designed to observe, evaluate, and strategically position attendees. Meghan's name, according to internal records, was manually added to the guest list. She did not simply arrive, she was selected. Analysts describe this as the final stage of vetting, a process that ensured she was both capable of navigating these environments and adaptable enough to be placed near individuals of influence. Over the following years, Meghan's lifestyle, travel, and associations continued to reflect the patterns of someone being positioned strategically. She attended private events on Mediterranean yachts, stayed in luxury suites in Monaco, Capri, and the Turkish Riviera, and appeared alongside high-net-worth individuals and Gulf financiers. All of this occurred while she publicly portrayed herself as a struggling actress, earning a modest income from small roles and endorsements. According to MI6's financial tracing unit, the expenses she incurred, luxury travel, private accommodations, event fees, far exceeded her known income. Analysts referred to this as being supported by shadow patrons, individuals who fund access and experiences without leaving a clear paper trail. The purpose of these patrons, the dossier suggested, was to place someone in a position where they could gain proximity to power, connections, and influence. These weren't mere social introductions. They were deliberate, strategic placements, designed to guide her toward opportunities that she may not have been able to secure on her own. Intelligence analysts reviewed thousands of records, including travel logs, yacht manifests, hotel stays, and photographs from private events. They noted patterns. She would disappear from Los Angeles for weeks during peak luxury travel seasons. Summer in the Mediterranean, winter in the Gulf, spring along the French Riviera. She would return as if nothing had happened, resuming her public narrative of struggling to find roles in Hollywood. The contrast was striking. Public perception told one story, intelligence records told another. Analysts labeled her as a social asset, someone cultivated and advanced into influential environments for long-term strategic outcomes. A particularly revealing moment involved a pair of diamond earrings. In October 2018, at a state dinner in Fiji, Meghan Markle wore cascading chopard earrings that drew global attention. The media reported them as borrowed or on loan. However, annexes of the Saudi dossier indicated that the earrings were a gift from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, delivered via a diplomatic intermediary months before Meghan began dating Prince Harry. Intelligence analysts interpreted these earrings as more than a luxury item. They were a closing gift, a symbol of loyalty, and a discreet signal from influential networks to confirm alignment and relationships. Wearing these earrings at the Fiji state dinner, shortly after global outrage over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, sent a message. Analysts suggested it signaled allegiance to networks that had supported her rise, and Princess Anne reportedly viewed this as evidence that Meghan had not severed her connections to powerful backers. The dossier also contained extensive notes on behavioral analysis, highlighting that Meghan's trajectory was consistent with deliberate advancement rather than independent social climbing. Analysts emphasized the pattern: attendance at high-value events, interactions with influential individuals, receipt of significant gifts, and strategic proximity to individuals of importance. Each step was consistent with a calculated process known in intelligence circles as strategic social placement. Prince Harry, according to sources, remained unaware of the full scope. In meetings with Princess Anne, he repeatedly dismissed concerns, framing them as misunderstandings or attacks on Meghan's character. The dossier suggested that his willingness to protect her, combined with the romantic narrative he embraced, made him an ideal target for someone wishing to influence royal access indirectly. By early 2017, Princess Anne reportedly confronted Harry directly. She presented him with the dossier, highlighting the discrepancies, the patterns of placement, and the financial anomalies. She asked critical questions. Who was funding these activities? Why was she attending these events? And what did it mean for his position within the royal family? Harry's response, consistent with previous accounts, was that he didn't care. He loved Meghan and refused to entertain the possibility that her social ascent might have been orchestrated. The dossier describes this moment as emotionally intense, with Anne remaining calm and factual, while Harry's reactions were driven by personal loyalty and love. Over the years, Harry's narrative publicly framed him as the protector, the one defending Meghan from an outdated institution, media scrutiny, and perceived injustice. Yet the confirmation of the dossier by Princess Anne in 2026 reframed that narrative entirely. The man who had believed he was the rescuer was confronted with evidence suggesting he may have been positioned to play a role in someone else's broader strategic operation. The ramifications of this confirmation extended beyond personal drama. The monarchy, already under scrutiny in a modern media environment, faced questions about institutional vulnerability. How had a figure like Meghan, with extensive private connections and support from shadow patrons, been able to enter such proximity to royal influence without earlier intervention? Analysts described this as a moment of reckoning, prompting reforms within the palace to tighten vetting, document external influences, and create systems to prevent strategic social placement in the future. From a narrative perspective, the dossier revealed the subtle interplay of influence, money, diplomacy, and personal relationships. It highlighted how appearances can be carefully curated, how social networks can be strategically navigated, and how individuals can be positioned without direct visibility to those being influenced. For Prince Harry, the revelation was existential. Every choice he had made, leaving the UK, stepping back from military roles, building a media platform, defending Meghan publicly, was now viewed in a new light. The sacrifices he had undertaken, which he believed were acts of autonomy and love, may have been anticipated and integrated into a broader pattern of strategic influence. Princess Anne's role, by contrast, was elevated in hindsight. Her discipline, observation, and patience allowed her to carry the knowledge of this dossier for nearly a decade, waiting for the moment when the truth could be acknowledged. She had acted not out of malice or judgment, but out of duty to the institution and the people she served. Public reaction to the confirmation was divided. Some lauded Anne's foresight, recognizing the courage it took to hold and act upon sensitive intelligence. Others expressed sympathy for Harry, acknowledging his human vulnerability, the trauma of losing his mother young, and the genuine affection he had for Meghan. Media outlets debated the implications, social networks exploded with discussion, and royal commentators dissected every aspect of the revelations. The Saudi dossier, once a confidential intelligence file, had now become a public story that intertwined love, loyalty, intelligence, social strategy, and institutional preservation. For Harry, Meghan, and the monarchy, the narrative had shifted. Events that were previously celebrated as serendipitous or romantic were now seen as potentially orchestrated. Gifts, appearances, and social connections were examined with a new lens, raising questions about agency, influence, and the subtle ways power operates in elite social systems. And yet, amid the revelations, many unanswered questions remained. Did Meghan understand the orchestration? Was she an active participant or an unaware beneficiary? What were the full implications for royal operations, and how would the palace respond to prevent similar situations in the future? As these questions circulated, the story remained alive, dynamic, and unresolved. But one fact had been firmly established. The Saudi dossier was real, and Princess Anne had confirmed it. For anyone following the royal story, this moment represented a dramatic shift, a turning point in the narrative, and a profound example of how intelligence, influence, and personal relationships intersect at the highest levels of power. Following the confirmation of the Saudi dossier, the focus naturally shifted to Prince Harry's response, which reportedly was a profound combination of shock, disbelief, and silence. Sources close to his security team described him as immobile for several hours, unable to process the full weight of what Princess Anne had revealed. He isolated himself in a guest room, declining food, phone calls, or any contact with the outside world. Meghan, at the time attending a branding summit in Los Angeles, was reportedly unreachable, and there was no immediate private contact with any senior members of the royal family. The psychological impact on Harry was intense. For years, he had crafted an identity rooted in love, sacrifice, and independence. He had left his royal duties, military titles, and sovereign grant, moved across the Atlantic, and publicly defended Meghan against perceived criticism from his family and the media. He had positioned himself as the hero, the one protecting the woman he loved from a system he saw as outdated and prejudiced. But now, with the Saudi dossier confirmed, that narrative was shaken at its core. Intelligence had suggested that Meghan's rise into proximity with Harry may not have been purely coincidental. Her lifestyle, travel, and access were consistent with deliberate social placement, facilitated by shadow patrons and orchestrated by figures like Marcus Anderson. Every step in her ascent, from yachts in the Mediterranean to high-profile events in Istanbul, Monaco, and the French Riviera, was under scrutiny for the possibility of strategic orchestration. The dossier did not accuse her of criminal activity or espionage, but it framed her trajectory as a process of careful placement into environments of influence and power, culminating in her proximity to Prince Harry. This reframing raised profound questions about personal agency, love, and perception. Did Harry knowingly ignore warning signs, or was he truly blind to them, driven by emotion and loyalty? Had his sacrifices, public statements, and media campaigns been unwittingly aligned with a broader strategy he could not see? Princess Anne, by contrast, maintained her disciplined composure. Having held the dossier for nearly a decade, she had observed, warned, and acted with restraint. She had approached Harry privately, attempting to alert him to the potential implications of his decisions. According to sources, she never raised her voice or attempted to coerce him. Instead, she presented facts and left him to make his own choices. Her patience and dedication to duty highlighted a striking contrast between personal emotion and institutional responsibility. While Harry reacted with shock, Anne's demeanor underscored the significance of strategic observation and measured action. The public and media response following the confirmation of the dossier was intense. Social media platforms in the United Kingdom saw a surge in discussions, with hashtags related to the Saudi dossier trending nationwide. News outlets analyzed the implications for the royal family, examining past interactions, gifts, and social connections in the context of the intelligence report. Analysts highlighted the importance of understanding not just the personal impact on Harry and Meghan, but the broader institutional lessons for the monarchy. In response, the palace reportedly began internal reviews and reforms aimed at tightening vetting procedures, documenting external influences, and establishing protocols to prevent future instances of strategic social placement. One significant change involved mandatory background reviews for potential romantic partners of senior royals, extending beyond the traditional vetting processes. Additionally, gifts, accommodations, and travel arranged by external parties were to be more closely monitored and recorded. These reforms were framed not as punishment for Harry or Meghan, but as necessary measures to preserve the integrity of the monarchy and prevent similar situations from occurring in the future. The narrative also examined the symbolic and material elements of Meghan's past, including gifts such as the chopard earrings. These luxury items, valued at hundreds of thousands of pounds, were traced to influential figures connected to Gulf networks and interpreted by analysts as loyalty signals. Wearing these gifts at public events was seen as an indication of continued alignment with her former supporters, even as she integrated into the royal family. Princess Anne reportedly interpreted these actions as a refusal to fully disengage from previous networks, further validating concerns outlined in the dossier. For Harry, the revelation of these details represented a profound psychological challenge. He had devoted years to defending Meghan publicly, framing himself as the hero, protecting her from the constraints of royal life. Now, evidence suggested that he may have been unknowingly playing a role in a larger strategy, with his actions aligning with outcomes he did not fully control. This realization was described by insiders as existentially shattering, forcing him to question the foundations of his decisions, relationships, and sacrifices.